Welcome back to another episode of Up Next in Commerce. I'm Stephanie Postles, and today I got to chat with Chris Reuter, who's the CEO of Spikeball, the game where it's kind of like volleyball, kind of like Foursquare. If you've ever seen it, you see how intense it gets. It's very big here in Austin. On today's episode, we got to chat all about how he built this business and where it came from. It actually started in the 80s, and he was a little kid playing it and had the idea, I wonder if we could make this into a business because it no longer exists. We also got to talk about how doing things that don't scale is so important in the beginning, and that's how he even launched his business for the first couple years, and the 3 surprising groups that Spikeball became really popular within, and how he leaned into those groups to scale the efforts even more. We also talked about, of course, what it was like being on Shark Tank. He ended up getting a deal, so I wanted to ask all the questions of how do you prepare, what was it like, what were the sharks like, what happened after the fact. And we also talked about, finally, the ever-evolving topic of supply chain issues and how they're thinking about adjusting Spikeball for the future to prepare them. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Up Next in Commerce. I'm your host, Stephanie Postles, CEO at mission.org. Today on the show, we have Chris Reuter, who's the CEO of Spikeball. Chris, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Stephanie.
I'm very excited to talk all things Spikeball. I actually just found out about Spikeball when I moved to Austin in January, so I feel like I'm really behind the curve. But for anyone who's like me, what is Spikeball? How would you describe it?
The most common description I hear is it's that weird trampoline game you saw people playing at the park or beach. In Austin, more often than not, I believe it's Zilker Park. Heard tons of people play there.
Yes.
But yeah, it looks like a mini trampoline almost, but you don't jump on it. You've got an inflatable rubber ball, and you play 2-on-2. It's a game that you volley back and forth. A lot of similar traits to volleyball, but rather than hitting a ball over the net, you spike the ball onto the net. And each team gets up to 3 hits, just like in volleyball. And when you hit it on the net towards the other team, it's now their turn to use their 3 hits to get it on. And if you can't get the ball on the net, the other team gets a point. First team to 21 wins. So usually that description confuses more people. So relying on the internet to looking at an image usually works a lot better.
Yep. Yeah, we were playing it. My neighborhood had a little street party, and one of the women brought it out, and I was like, what is this? And my 3-year-old was trying to play, and he just kept stealing the ball. And after a while, I got the hang of it, but super fun. When was the first time you experienced Spikeball in your life?
1989.
Okay.
Which seems like 100 years ago. But I was 14 at the time and lived in a town called Kankakee, Illinois, which is about an hour south of Chicago. And some of my brother's friends actually bought one at a toy store, brought it back to the neighborhood, and they played a bunch. I was sort of the young, annoying brother, so I wasn't really allowed to play with them, but looked cool. Played a little bit then, and from what little we knew, the original company that launched it in 1989, but killed it in 1991. So had a very brief first life, and then my brother, those friends, and I kind of kept playing on and off over the years, and then eventually, whenever we'd play, people would ask us about it, and cool game, where can I get one? And finally the light bulb went off, and we're like, I wonder if we can bring this thing back to life. So that's what we did.
That's cool. And at the time, were you working in a corporate job, and were you ready to kind of go on your own, or was it more just like, oh, that's a cool idea, and I'm going to sit and think about it for a long time?
Well, we did the thinking thing for a couple of years, and I think that's what most people do with an idea, right? You think about it, and then you begin sentences with, wouldn't it be cool if, or we should, ... And
one day.
Yeah. And you do nothing. And then, whether it's a few weeks or years later, you see that somebody else launched it, and you're like, damn, they stole my idea.
Yep.
But, so we definitely did that for a couple of years. And then finally I was like, all right, guys, let's, enough of the talk. Let's go ahead and see if we can give this thing a shot. And to answer your question, by that time, that was 2007 when we incorporated. And at that time, I believe I was working for the Xbox division of Microsoft. So advertising sales is kind of what I did for about 10 years. And, they're pretty cool jobs, but I wasn't that into them. Xbox, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
I worked for Live Nation for a couple of years, so sold advertisements around concerts and music artists and stuff. Um, but they were essentially jobs. They paid well. People were nice enough, but I, wasn't really that motivated. And so when Spikeball came around, like the big difference for me was, I was like, wait, I'm actually making decisions here. I have a say in the general direction of where this thing goes. And that was intoxicating to me. It was a very new thing, working at these gigantic companies and being on, I was essentially a lower level salesperson. I didn't have a whole lot of autonomy, and I didn't, really know control. And, but yeah, I did with Spikeball. So, and when I launched it, I didn't ever think, I didn't think in a million years it would be big enough to employ me full time, let alone, 40 other people like we have now. I thought it'd be a fun hobby.
Yep.
That's what it was for the first couple of years. And then it kept growing and growing. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is kind of a real thing now. So
This is a business. So
yeah.
when you were even first exploring this idea, because now my mind is racing thinking like how many other things existed in history that just kind of failed but could come back? Like what did it look like to take a product that had already been out in the world? Like was there patent issues? Was there old founders still kind of wanting ties to it? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, we talked to the attorneys and they said the trademark had been expired for, I don't know, 10 years or something like that. So nobody owned the name Spikeball. All you had to do was file for the trademark. And I think that cost us like $800 or something. There never was a patent that protected the product itself. So the attorney's like, yeah, you guys can do what you want. And, this was 2007. The original product was pulled or killed in 1991. So it's 16 years of nothing. So nobody in the world had, very, very few people had heard the word Spikeball when we came around and relaunched. We did talk to the guy that invented it and, had brief conversations around doing something together, and nothing really came of that. So me, my brother, my cousin, and those other childhood friends all chipped in. It was a total of about maybe $110,000 all in, and incorporated, spent the $800 for the trademark. And we decided I was going to be the one that was going to be running it. So they all were essentially silent shareholders. So I kind of ran it on my own. I knew nothing about starting a business, sporting goods, manufacturing overseas, and I have a degree in photojournalism. Talked my way out of most business classes in college. So was not more, I guess by the traditional sense, I couldn't have been more ill-equipped to start this. But I think my background and sort of lack of experience did give me the comfort in asking the sort of dumb questions, or what people that know better would consider were dumb questions. So, yeah.
Cool. So you said the first couple of years were a little bit slow. What were you doing behind the scenes to kind of start ramping things up? Because you look at it now and like you said, you see it everywhere. There's leagues, there's a ton of players. It's very competitive, very intense players, at least here in Austin. Like what were you doing to kind of create that, scale and excitement around the game that didn't exist before?
Yeah, going way back to our launch day, I think it was June 14th, 2008, friends and family down at North Avenue Beach in Chicago. Beautiful beach right on Lake Michigan, and very high foot traffic area, a bunch of people running by, going by on their bikes, etc. So we brought a bunch of Spikeball sets down there for the afternoon. I literally brought a clipboard with a pen, and anytime somebody would stop and kind of give the weird look, and you could kind of read their lips, and they're like, what is that trampoline game? I'd walk up, I'd introduce myself, say, oh, I just launched this company, you got this thing Spikeball, why don't you come and play? And it was like a million turns of that flywheel. We finished year one at, I think revenue was $10,882, if I remember right. And I had nothing to compare that to. I was like, I think it's good. It's $10,882 more dollars than we started with. And then the next year, I think we were $18,000. And the next year, 45. And the year after that, I think we were over 100. And by year 5, we were at $1.4 million with
Wow.
0 full-time employees.
Okay, that's a big jump from 100 to 1.5. So what happened then? I mean, it seems like you were doing a lot of things that weren't really scaling, which is what a lot of companies should do in the early days of like trying to spread the word, get the excitement, going to the beach. Like,
Yeah.
what did you do between those 2 years though to kind of, elevate those sales like that?
Well, it went 10, 18, 45, 100,
Oh,
475.
okay. Okay.
And then, yeah, so it was,
Still a
I
big
think
jump.
we had a couple years there of 3 or 4x.
Mhm.
But to answer your question of what was I doing, I guess a typical day was, go to the day job, come home, hang out with wife and kids. They go to bed around 8 or 9. Spikeball work begins around 9. And then, back then our quote warehouse was my basement. So around midnight is when I would do shipping.
Mhm.
So go down to the basement, grab 1 or 2 boxes, depending on how many sets I'd sold that day. Slap a label on it, drive at midnight to the post office. There's a late night post office not far from my place. Drop those off, come back to the house, work until, keep working until 1 or 2 in the morning, go to bed, go to the day job, same thing. And one thing I was doing that I think did allow us to grow so fast in those early years was all of our sales were at spikeball.com back then. We were not in any retail stores. I don't think we went on Amazon until maybe year 4, year 5, something like that.
Mhm.
So I emailed nearly every single customer that purchased from us. So, let's say you had ordered one for me. I'd reply to your the order confirmation, say, hey, Stephanie, thanks for buying Spikeball set. I'm going to be dropping your set off at the post office tonight. It should arrive there in about 2 days or so. I see you live in Austin. What a beautiful city. By the way, if you don't mind me asking, how'd you hear about Spikeball?
Hmm.
And that last question turned out to be just absolute gold. And I wasn't asking that because I, was such a smart marketer. I was genuinely curious because, most of our first sales were people with the same last name as me or friends that I knew, what I sort of consider pity sales, like, oh, Chris started this company. We'll buy one just to be nice.
Mhm.
But when I started seeing people from all over the country buying it, it's like, how in the heck did somebody from Austin hear about? And so I'd ask people like, how'd you hear about it? And I identified 3 groups that I never would have considered before. The first was PE teachers.
Mhm.
They were way into it because, the price point of $60, they love it and they can make up their own games using the equipment. I heard from ultimate Frisbee players. I don't know how the seed got planted in the
Yeah.
ultimate community.
Who was the
but
influencer there?
don't know, but I owe them a beer or a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I heard from so many people. Yeah, is that an ultimate tournament? I saw it, or my buddy that plays ultimate told me about it.
Mhm.
Then the third group was faith-based youth groups.
Okay.
Again, no clue how that happened. But within that group, I heard from a lot of people at Young Life, and I had never heard of Young Life before. So I Googled it and I learned that it's this like gigantic worldwide, like high school Christian group thing. And they all get together like once a week in their local chapters and have some sort of group activity. And it was quickly becoming Spikeball. So
That's cool.
with each of those, once I had sort of identified that there was a fire burning within those communities, it's like, all right, how can I pour gas on this fire? So started giving free sets to PE teachers saying, oh, do you know of any other PE teachers at other schools? Hey, ultimate players, how about I sponsor your team and I'll give you guys a bunch of free sets and you have to give a free one to your favorite opponent at every tournament you play. And these are college ultimate teams. So, and they're playing at the tournament. So now tons of other college students at all these other colleges are seeing our product. And the cool thing was, they're not seeing it from me, somebody that works for the company that's out there that has this ulterior motive trying to sell you something. It's from one of their peers.
Yep.
And that I think was pretty critical. And, the Young Life sets, when we'd send out free sets, we'd say, hey, this is compliments of this other Young Life group. They thought you would like it.
Oh, that's cool.
So that I think, because when I launched the company, again, knowing nothing, I was like, okay, it's sports. It's probably going to be younger folks. So 18 to 34-year-old males is probably our target.
Mhm.
And Coca-Cola doesn't even have a marketing budget big enough to go after a target that wide. I just didn't know any better, but asking that question, I was able to identify these smaller niche groups. And that, I think, gave us a bit of a turbo boost to keep going. So
That's great. I mean, you were tapping into all the things people talk about now, like personalizing the email, "Oh, I see you're in Austin," and then asking, "Where did this come from?" I love that. And then also the
yeah,
piece around essentially setting your customers up to be the heroes by saying, "Oh, this gift is coming from someone else." So you're stepping back and not even kind of being in the arena and letting the customers kind of talk to each other, which I think is brilliant and a much more organic way to kind of spread. I love that.
absolutely. And organic, we hear that a ton. The other, like, the highest compliment I can receive, and we do hear it from time to time, is when people just tell us how authentic our brand is.
Mhm.
Um, and I've shared this with others in that we don't need Spikeball to be in the spotlight.
Mhm.
If we are, great, but that's not the goal. We want to work with the leader in whatever community. And how can we help he or she develop their own community in their hometown and make them the king or the queen?
Mhm.
We'll give them free equipment. We'll give them whatever support we can. And that usually shows up in the form of somebody starting a club at high school, somebody starting a club in college, or people running tournaments. We as a company, we run a couple dozen tournaments per year. We just had our national championship a few weeks ago, had almost 1,000 players there, which is just
Wow,
insane.
that's awesome.
Um, but if you look at the number of events we host versus how many just happen total,
Mhm.
it's a tiny percentage. And I love that. I want the community to have that ownership, and I want local leaders developing everywhere. And how can we stay in the background, but help them build this big thing?
Mhm.
So that's our general approach, and knock on wood, it's been working so far.
Yeah, that's great. So when thinking about letting the community kind of run these tournaments and kind of, getting into the community, do you have like guiding principles to kind of help them get started? Because I could see, if there aren't really some core themes to like stick with, all of a sudden there's like 1,000 different ways to play spike ball. People are going to different, communities and being like, that's not how you play. So like, how do you set up the kind of the leader of that community up for success so then it spreads in a way that's like true to the brand and the actual game?
In the early days when we'd host tournaments and we'd have people from the West Coast flying to East Coast and
Yeah.
vice versa, there
Mhm.
were definitely very uneven rules.
Mhm.
Not uneven, but inconsistent.
Yeah.
The West Coast guys there was a tournament at Harvard, and their rules around serving were wildly different, and so lots of confusion.
Mhm.
We standardized a lot of that. But again, it wasn't me and some other employees sitting in a room just determining what the rules are going to be. We're in the room, but we're in the room with players and other community members and saying, "Hey guys," and kind of debating and going back and forth, saying, "Here's what we think it should be. What do you think?" So it's done together. I don't want, especially around rules of this sport, I don't want the company demanding or making these changes. I want everything to be done in conjunction with community. So we do have there are official rules to this sport. We're way more formal today than, of course, we were years ago. Spikeball is the name of the company, the brand, but it's actually not the name of the sport. The name of the sport actually is round net.
Oh, really?
So
Oh,
literally a
okay.
round net,
Yeah.
right? So Spikeball is a company that makes equipment for the sport of round net.
Mm,
With that said, most people think, and they say, "Oh yeah, I just played Spikeball," and it's like, well, you actually played round net using Spikeball equipment.
yeah.
Most people don't know that, and I had to come up with the term round net because if we kept using Spikeball the way it was, it would become a generic term. And if it became a generic term, we lose the trademark, and now that much
Got
much
it.
more difficult to. And I learned this through I was speaking with a woman named Mary Horwath. She used to head up marketing at Rollerblade.
Mhm.
And way back in the day in the 80s and 90s when they were first blowing up, and she's the one that came up with the term inline skates and
Mhm.
inline skating because people were using rollerblade in a generic fashion. So she's like, "Chris, get ahead of this early. So you need just like the name baseball or basketball, right? Nobody owns the name to that
Yeah.
word. It's generic. Everybody can use it. And we had to do that because, the vision of our company is to become the next great global sport. Okay, if we want it to become a big, legitimate sport, it needs to have a generic name. So with that said, there is the IRF, which is the International Round Net Federation. There are a couple dozen countries that are members of that. There's a board for it. It is a legal nonprofit. But then there's also the Spikeball Round Net Association, which is what the company is involved in. And we will sponsor different groups, sponsor different teams, tournament directors, et cetera. So trying to build this entire ecosystem around this new sport. Spikeball is sort of it's the biggest company supporting it. We're starting to see smaller companies, like, some people are developing apparel brands around RoundNet. Others are creating like training videos and stuff like that. So I'm hoping this entire ecosystem will build up, and, we all will sort of build businesses together.
Yep.
But it's a lot, but it's fun.
That's so interesting. I mean, when you think about, big brands who kind of like Google, everyone wants to be that, where it's like your company is so amazing that it's used in everyday language. But I never actually thought about the implications of like, does it become generic? Then you lose, all your ability to defend the brand. That's really good. I feel like that's the first time I've ever heard this. So you're spreading your knowledge and it'll help everyone listening, which I love that.
Yeah, I was talking to I forget his exact title, but I think it was like the lead attorney at CrossFit. And this was years ago, but he was telling me, he's like, we spend an ungodly amount of money every year defending our trademarks. A lot of people think CrossFit is a sport, and they use it in a generic fashion. Right.
Yeah.
So they unfortunately have to like sue CrossFit gym owners for using it in an inappropriate fashion. And now they're making it work, right? Crazy successful company. But yeah, he was like, be careful, because if you do it wrong, it can really come back to bite you. So
wow. What a great lesson to learn early on, so you can avoid all those legal costs. I feel like that's where you don't want to end up as a company. It's like you see everyone having to spend so much money there. I'm like, please, let's make sure that's not me one day.
Yes.
So you guys went on Shark Tank. I think it was around 2015 or so. Is that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I want to hear about that, because we've had a couple other companies on the show who've been on there. Everyone has different experiences. Some people got offers, some took them, some didn't get anything, but lots of exposure. I want to hear a bit of the behind the scenes of like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. Anytime I get a call from an entrepreneur saying I'm thinking of going on or thinking of applying, my answer is always yes, go for it. We did do a deal on the show. I did it with Damon John. But the deal never closed. So we spoke a few times after filming and never quite saw eye to eye on general future of the company. And that was fine. There's no hard feelings. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. The tricky part was, we filmed in, I think it was like October of 2014. But we didn't air until May of 2015. So we were the final segment.
Like, did they tell you like it's not happening until then?
No. So after you film, they basically, the producers, as you're leaving, they say, hey, thanks. We thought it went great or whatever. And if your episode is going to air, we'll call you 2 weeks before it airs. And if we never call, then it's not going to air. But if you filmed this season, Chris, so if it's not in this season, it's never going to air. So it's not like it'll go to the next season.
Okay.
But what that means is, if you've only got 2 weeks to prepare, and it takes us 90 to 100 days to get our product from the factory. So we need an insane amount of inventory to prepare for what could just be a windfall of sales. So we had our warehouse was just bursting at the seams for those 7-8 months for an event that we never knew if it was going to happen or not.
Oh, so you were preparing. You're like, we are going to air, and you were preparing your warehouse for it.
I was so obviously after we finished filming, I knew that we had done a deal. But just because you've done a deal does not mean you're going to air. The only people that care about the quality of your actual business are the sharks. The only thing that producers care about is, were you entertaining? So if you get a deal done, but you were the most boring person in the world, you're probably not going to get on air.
Yeah. Did you know that
Um,
before going on, and did you prepare yourself to be entertaining?
I can't tell you how many episodes I watched. I
Hmm.
talked to a handful of people that had been on it before. And I did know, like, usually the people that, just get eaten alive by the sharks, those are usually people that, it's not that they have a poor business, it's that they didn't prepare
Hmm.
for the show. Like, either they didn't know their numbers, or sometimes people are just jerks. They just show up and they're way more arrogant than they should be,
Yep.
or so I wanted to make sure I knew my numbers. I knew I had a rock solid business. Even before Shark Tank, we were already skyrocketing. We were profitable. So I was like, all right, even if things go terrible, we'll be fine.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was so nervous about the memorized part, right when the entrepreneur walks. Yeah, here's another thing, right when the entrepreneur walks through the doors and you see them walking out, that's literally the first time they've seen the sharks. So when I flew out there, I assumed that, I don't know, probably meet the sharks before we film, maybe have a cup of coffee backstage,
Yep.
and then we'd go do the thing. No, they want that element of surprise, and and it makes sense.
Yeah.
But the producer's like, all right, as soon as you walk through the doors, you'll see like an X out there, so just stand there. And you have to stand there in complete silence for a minute or two while we get the audio and lighting and everything set up.
Wow. Awkward.
And awkward in all caps. I mean, you're standing there with just your arms by your side, and you're maybe 12 feet from the 5 sharks that are just, facing you,
Hmm.
in complete silence. I mean, even doing that with a good friend of yours is
Yeah.
awkward,
So
right?
weird.
Let
Yep.
alone 5 sharks. So, the 1 or 2 minutes felt like it was about 6 months. And then finally somebody yelled action or go, or I don't know what. And then I had to do the memorized part. And in general, I'm terrible at memorizing
Yep.
things.
Same.
But I can't tell you how many times I had practiced the pitch, and I literally recorded it, and that was what I'd listen to on the drive to and from work. It was myself, and we had 4 others. They played a couple points, but they weren't talking.
Hmm.
But the night before, we were out in the parking lot of the hotel until about midnight, practicing our entrance,
Yep.
practicing the thing, or my pitch. And once the pitch was over and we got to Q&A, that's when I was able to exhale. And I was like, all right, I know my stuff. I've got a great business. I can now be confident.
Yep.
And yeah, it was a great experience. We still get reruns to this day. Like, it was 6 years ago that it aired.
Wow.
And reruns are airing all over the world.
Mhm.
Like a year or 2 ago, we get emails from retailers all over the world. Not often, but maybe a couple a week, saying, hey, we'd like to carry your product.
Mhm.
And in one day, we got 5 separate emails from retailers in Norway. I'm like, that's weird. What's going on in Norway? It turns out Shark Tank had run the night before. So
Man,
it's
the gift that keeps giving for years and years.
exactly.
That's the definition of good evergreen content right there, some content marketing. So, I
Yes.
mean, thinking about today's landscape, I mean, I'm guessing, like you said, it runs on Shark Tank and, any other initiatives you're doing, you get some pretty big spikes in orders. What are you doing behind the scenes? Because, I'm hearing from a lot of my guests, of course, around all the logistics and supply chain issues. And like, what are you doing when your spikes sometimes might not, you're not prepared for reruns to give you big, orders?
Yeah. The unfortunate thing that we're doing right now is spending a lot of money. We used to pay pre-COVID, we'd spend maybe around $5,000. I think it was maybe $5,000 or $6,000 to get a 40-foot steel container from China to our warehouse in Kankakee, which is just south of Chicago.
Hmm.
So $5,000, $6,000. We're now paying about $28,000 for that same container.
Wow.
So multiply that by however many hundreds of containers, and holy smokes, that is just painful.
Hmm.
So we're making it work. We're having to really increase our financial skills and sort of managing cash flow. But if we're talking with a lot of our customers about doing more FOB, freight on board, where they take the freight in China, as opposed to us being responsible to bringing it to the U.S. and then getting it to them there. And we're also exploring, like, okay, how can we make the box smaller so we can fit more units on a single container? Exploring everything we can under the sun. We've got Yenna, who's our woman that runs our freight and logistics, and she's doing a great job of trying to, call all sorts of different suppliers. And, but, it's on some of those ocean liners, those big, I think they fit maybe, I don't know, some of them fit like 15, 20,000 containers at a time. Like the size of these things is just insane. And we're such a small company, we do not have the leverage to demand better pricing, or, it was laughable. One of our retailers suggested recently that we see if we can contract an entire ship in order to get better rates.
Wow.
What world are you living in that you think we can just, like, that? Home Depot does that, Walmart does that, absolutely, but Spikeball, I guess I should be flattered that they thought that was
that's nice.
Realistic. But
I mean, can you partner with big retailers on that and be like, hey, get my stuff over here? Like, if you're selling at Dick's or something, be like, can you help with this instead?
Well, that's what they actually want that. So that's what I was mentioning earlier, that FOB. So if, so some of the, and it's only the larger retailers that are actually sophisticated enough or have the capabilities to do that, where some will literally pick it up at the factory. And, if you think of like Walmart, right, what they're paying for a 40-foot container, I have no idea what they're paying, but I'm assuming it's an absolute fraction of what we're paying. So it's better for both of us. We can charge Walmart less if we don't have to pay that $28,000 for a container. So yes, we are working together with nearly everybody to try and get that done. But it is, tricky. It takes weeks, months to set that sort of stuff up. So, so hoping that once a lot of this stuff gets figured out, I saw that, the port in Los Angeles just moved, or maybe it was Long Beach, I think, moved to 24/7, where they weren't working around the clock before that. And so, with the pricing of the containers and everything else, I'm hoping we'll start to see some cracks in things coming back to normal. I don't think we'll ever get back to a $5,000 or $6,000 container, but spending way more time on freight and logistics than I ever thought we would. But, and I don't know, it's interesting, like, I've read an article a few months ago saying that a lot of the supply chain issues are due to huge changes in spending habits for Americans. So pre-COVID, we spent a lot of money on going out to restaurants, going on vacations, and a lot of like service-based businesses. COVID hits and everybody's stuck at home, and we're now all buying stuff.
Workout stuff, sports stuff, all the things that you're in.
And where does all that stuff come from? It all comes from China. So, and yes, to your point, what kind of stuff? The number one industry that saw the biggest benefit from COVID was outdoor recreation. So last year was fantastic for us from a top line perspective. This year and last year, the bottom line though was like, okay, sales are growing at a pretty amazing clip, but we need to figure out how to do it in a profitable fashion. We're a bootstrapped company, independent, very proud of that, and hoping that will be the way we continue. But, it's not like we're going to, we call our VC partner and say, let's raise another round. I mean, we probably could go that route, but it's not a route I'm all that interested in. So,
So, I mean, when thinking about what's happening right now, and a lot of businesses like yours are adjusting to kind of, find new partnerships and ways of, getting the products here. Do you think that in a year or two, things will maybe be back to normal and people have to kind of like unravel the new plans that they just created? Or do you see a lot of companies kind of bringing things, back to the US? Because I hear about all the issues and I'm like, man, I know it's hard to get manufacturers here who will build what people want, but it seems like a lot to deal with getting stuff from overseas. And if that lasts, like maybe you just need a new plan altogether. What are your thoughts?
We're exploring everything. So we actually are talking to a couple U.S. manufacturers right now. We've been talking to them a couple of years ago, and the pricing just didn't work. But we're talking to one right now. Sorry, I got a fighter jet flying over. I don't think there's like an air show here, but there's been a bunch of fighter jets flying the last couple of days. So
that's all right.
What's going on? One sec. Can you hear it?
No, not now. I did earlier.
Okay. So yes, we are talking to U.S. manufacturers, and we have been talking to them for a few years now. We have not been able to get the numbers to work. I think we're getting close on one right now, and it wouldn't necessarily be for the whole portfolio of everything we make, but it'd be for a new product. And who knows, maybe that could grow into them making more of our stuff. I'd love that because, just all the supply chain stuff right now. I also love the idea of, and we've been talking about that, how can we make more money from non-physical goods? Right now, nearly all of our revenue comes from selling a physical product. And, if it's not a supply chain issue, a couple of years ago is tariffs. And, it takes a lot. If you think of how many things have to work perfectly to start with a pile of plastic pellets in China and have that eventually turn into a beautifully manufactured product that lands at a warehouse south of Chicago. So many things have to happen perfectly between then. And, we are dabbling in the software world. We have this tournament management software called Fuego, where, a lot of the tournaments, whether we host them or independent directors host them, they used to be run on like Google Sheets or an Excel spreadsheet, and you needed a lot of volunteers for tournaments. And if like you drew up the brackets and then one team didn't show, you'd have to redraw the whole thing. And it was a huge nightmare. This Fuego software makes it so easy. You need a fraction the number of people to help run it. It has all these bells and whistles, and we've been wondering, like, could this be used for other sports as well? And we've been talking to people in other sports that are sharing some frustrations around tournament management software. So
that's smart.
I don't know. There may be a thing there, but even before that came around, I was challenging the team saying, guys, right now all of our money is coming from a physical thing. And most companies that make a physical product, when they say they want to diversify, they usually make some other physical product. And I'd imagine we'll go that route, but I absolutely want to go the software's route as well. Like, I'm very jealous of software margins and just seeing what a lot of these guys are doing. So if we could balance that out, and that could be a significant portion of what we do, that would just be a wonderful hedge against $28,000 containers.
Yeah. What about playing the game in VR or sports betting? Or that's my two ideas right now. That's all I got.
You've been listening to some of our meetings, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been. Yeah, I had to prepare for this interview. I've been on all your board meetings. But yeah, I mean, I could see that being huge. Like, why, if you don't have to go in person and can play online, and it seems like that space is really, hearing about all these virtual communities popping up and people buying virtual land, and seems like in the next 10 years, like people are gonna be leaning heavily into that world. I don't fully get it yet, but I feel like it seems like it's growing exponentially.
Yeah. Whether it's VR, whether it's betting, we're having some internal chats around NFTs and crypto. And is there something we can do there? Speaking of Shark Tank, a few weeks ago, I was tweeting with some guys about, trying to learn more about how consumer brands are working with crypto and with NFTs. And somebody tagged Mark Cuban on that. He's been doing a lot with NFTs, and I forget his exact reply, but he said something like, "This time I'm in." You
better follow through.
Maybe there's a future there. But
trophies as NFTs, like, gotta make sure your trophy is the real one.
Exactly. Could it be a trophy? Could it be tied to our events? Is it, we come out with some like limited edition products a couple times a year. So maybe if you buy an NFT, you get first look at those. Maybe you get a VIP treatment at some of our tournaments. Not exactly sure. I think there's something there, but
Yeah.
Not exactly sure what it is yet, but
Cool. I
could be
love
fun.
that. Yeah, that's exciting. I'll be watching on the sidelines and listening. You just want just kidding. Well, where do you guys want to be over the next 1 to 3 years? Like, what are you most excited about right now?
Um, I'm trying to be excited about our challenges with supply chain and
Okay.
finances. I am confident we'll figure it out. I am confident we'll be a hell of a lot stronger in 1 to 3 years once we have this figured out.
Hmm.
But right now it's kind of hard to be excited about it, but we'll figure it out. I am excited. We had to cancel our tournaments for a little over a year,
Hmm.
and that was a big bummer. That's
Yeah.
the best place to see our community in action. Just, hundreds of people, if not thousands of people together. So
Hmm.
we were supposed to have our world championship. First ever world championship was going to be last year. We had to cancel it. We're going to have it this year. We had to cancel it due to COVID. So I'm hoping we'll do it next year. It's most likely going to be in Belgium.
Okay. Cool.
We had it scheduled last year, and by the time we actually opened registration thinking it was going to happen, and I think we had like over 20 countries registered for it.
Hmm.
And then COVID went into full force, so we had to cancel it. But whether it's an event like that or more of our events on ESPN. So a lot of our tournaments are showing up on ESPN now, and continuing to march towards sort of that legitimization of the sport. This morning, a friend of mine sent me a clip. The show Squawk on the Street on CNBC.
Yeah.
Somehow David Faber this morning started talking about how he stumbled on a spike ball net on the beach or something.
Wow. Here comes some more sales. Thanks, David.
Right? Yeah, like just so many bizarre references like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got an email from a guy this morning saying, hey, we're getting ready to plan some like JoJo Siwa like tour all over US and Europe or something. Let's see if we can get Spikeball involved in that or something. Like just all these random things coming, but we don't pay for this sort of stuff. It more or less just happens organically, and I think again people are attracted to the brand. So looking forward to doing more of that, and yeah, we'll see. But it's been fun.
Cool. That's amazing. All right. Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show and giving us some of the behind the scenes at Spikeball. Until then, where can people find out more about yourself and Spikeball?
Across all social media channels, just at Spikeball. And for me, I'm most active on Twitter at Spikeball Chris.
Amazing. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Stephanie.